Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have a real life friend, somebody I've actually met in person, which is so rare these days. Jodi Cowles. Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
I think we should start by telling everybody where we met because it was an epic adventure for sure. Why don't you give us a little background on where we were when we met?
Yeah, it was at the Bob Goff Writers Retreat, which I knew about, I think I counted 8 people who had gone over the last year, and they just talked about the amazing, miraculous adventure of it. So I went and met a lot of very cool people like yourself. It was great.
Let me ask you that. What was your biggest takeaway from that adventure?
It was a big encouragement because at this season of my life, I've always been a storyteller, but at this season in my life, I'm helping people tell their stories, and the stories that most light up my eyes, the stories I love helping people tell, are passionate God stories. So to come and meet all of these people who had a story like burning, but they didn't know what to do with it, was so encouraging because we sat by the campfire kind of thing, at every little window of opportunity, and sort of shared our hearts and little snippets of our testimonies and our stories. And just, I have always loved, but it was particularly sweet to hear the things that little bits of what God has done in people's lives, and that people are taking these leaps. Not everybody's a writer. Writing is really hard, but so people were just there trying. Like, I feel this, I have this burden on me. The Lord's telling me to write it, but I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never written anything. It was really fun. That was probably my favorite. I had, a personal takeaway about my own writing as well, but that was probably my favorite aspect of it.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things about your particular story is that it comes in so many different layers. Like you've done a lot over the years, international teaching, obviously the work that you do now in publishing. So I'm always kind of curious, how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I would have, probably thought about for an hour.
Which is why I don't ever give the questions ahead of time.
That's really good. So we can just see what comes out.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
You've got a verbal processor here, so I'll get around to the answer. No, I think storytelling. I think I did a test years ago, and we had to index part out the phases of our lives, and I've had a lot of different phases, a lot of different things I've done, and they all kind of came down to storytelling in some way, shape, or form. I think I think we all are, but I have felt particularly personally formed by story, and that it's really important to tell our stories.
There are a lot of leaders listening who are hearing you talk about storytelling and know that it's a big part of their job to communicate the story of whatever it is they're leading. Talk to me about your opinion on storytelling. Is it something that can be learned? Are you born with it? Is it a combination of the both? Like, some people are naturally gifted orators or writers, and other people have to put the work in. What's your opinion on storytelling as a leadership skill?
I think that the best way to get to somebody's heart is to tell a story. And we don't change unless our heart is touched. So I think in leadership, you're trying to inspire and mold and correct and set the course of the vision for your company or your family or your small business. And the best way to do that is to engage people's emotions, engage the kind of the pillars and the values that we build our lives around. And doing that with story is the best way. I, in a previous life, was on eHarmony, so that's a whole different story. That
what? You're just gonna drop that and then keep moving?
I have to keep moving because that's just a part of the story. But I long distance dated this guy who said he preferred truth. That's why he told me he didn't read fiction. And I thought, that little nugget has driven me for 20 years, just kind of as a goad. And I think we can look at Jesus and the fact that he told stories all the time. And you can tell a quick story that just goes right to the heart of it, and it changes people. And we prefer to write memoir, we prefer to write self-help, all of those genres, because they're, in some ways, they're a little bit easier. Hey, look, this is the sermon and these are the 3 points of application.
Sure.
Those have their place. They absolutely do. But I think when we are significantly moved is when we change, and it's the quickest way to change. So I would say I've run across a lot of people who are great orators and who are great at verbal leading and verbal storytelling, and it's a different language. I speak a couple languages because of my time overseas, and I think, for instance, last year I co-wrote a business book, which was really a fun experience. But I took this guy, this 70, 75-year-old guy who had been had a wonderful business idea, and his legacy, he wanted to write it all down, and he could not, because he needed someone to translate it. So I translated his 20 hours of video, the talks that he gave all the time, and I translated it into the written word. And it's a different way. It's not as bad as a different language, but I think it, you do need to translate what works well verbally into what works well in the written word. And some people are, as you said, some people are gifted at that, and some people have other gifts, but it's certainly learnable, or it's certainly available to everyone, because you can everybody spills out everything they have in the first draft, and then you just need to get however much editing you need to get.
If you were sitting across from a faith-driven executive or entrepreneur, somebody who is trying to lead more than just work, but also a movement, and they were like, Jodi, I am just dog water when it comes to being a storyteller, what's the one thing that they can do? Like something that we could put handles on and really like they could practice to be a better storyteller tomorrow?
I think read good story.
So is that, now let's talk about that. Is that fiction? Yeah. Is that nonfiction? Is that your trade books, as Bob would call them, right? Like what does good story look like? How do you know when you found a good story?
I don't want to be offensive or anything, so I know that we all well,
it's fine. You can't offend me at all, and my podcast family is the most gracious group of people you'll ever meet. So you're good. You can't offend me.
Okay. Well, I think that the difference lies in we all, for an hour a day, read or watch garbage. I mean, we turn off our brain.
Cell phone, doom scrolling, right? Doom
scrolling, or, the Kindle Unlimited, just reading one book after another where you just swap the names of the characters. Those aren't the kind of, I think the kind of stories that you're talking about are the ones that you read and you're still thinking about, like a week later, or the ones that you're compelled to tell someone about. So those are often not the doom scrolling kind of stories. They're the stories that maybe they're hard to read, maybe they're not, but they have something that touches you, and you feel compelled to share it. So that is different for every person. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I read history and I read fiction. I read nonfiction for my work. And it's the same thing. I mean, I edited 2 manuscripts over the holidays, and there were aspects of each of them. I never would have read them in real life, but there were aspects of each of them as I read them that I went and told somebody the next day. And those are the kind of stories, I think, number one, they're going to teach you how to be a better storyteller if you're paying attention. Read it and pay attention to what it is that moved you. Was it, and pay attention to how they crafted their story. And then those are the kind of stories that that will help you be a better storyteller and will help you assemble the way that you are going to tell your story.
Now, can we talk a little bit about your creative process, your personal creative process? Because the creative process, it fascinates me to death, right? And so it's like you're predominantly a fiction writer. Is that a fair statement? I don't want to box you in anywhere, but from what I've seen, predominantly a fiction writer. How do you begin to craft the story? Because this is You were so kind, and you sent me a copy of one of your books, Some Wandered in the Desert, and it's a thick book. Like this is not 60,000 words. This is a chunk. Talk to me about the creative process. Which, by the way, I'm so excited to jump into this book for this. I'm going on vacation tomorrow, and this is what's coming with me for my fun reading. So tell me about the creative process and how you jump into it.
Well, I am a predominantly fiction writer. You're right. I'm terrible about genre. I have not stuck to one genre. I've done thriller and political treatise and allegory and international comedy. So, but the way that it all starts is the same. I usually have a question that I'm wrestling with the Lord. It sort of foments for a while, and then I write it out as I'm working through that question with the Lord. So the one that you're about to read, which I look forward to hearing what you think of it, I wrote when I was an international aid worker traveling through North Africa, worried about being kidnapped. I wrote a book about an international aid worker traveling through North Africa who did get kidnapped. And because I was working through my own fear and my own thoughts about lots of terrible things happen in life. And is God still good? And can God put you somewhere in the middle of something terrible because he has good purposes? And does he harm his children in the pursuit of grabbing more of his children? And so those are the kind of things that I was thinking through as I was traveling. I had colleagues write down the license plate as they sent me off on my own across Africa in a shared taxi because they didn't know if I would arrive, and they wanted they wanted a license plate to give the State Department. So those are the kind of experiences that I was having in my work. I worked for an international aid organization. I did video, and I went to these crazy places that I should not have been going, but that's where my colleagues were working, and they had to send me from place to place. Anyway, so I was going because that's what the Lord told me to do, and taking every sort of precaution that you could, but really wrestling through that fear. And I wrestled through it and got to a great place, and nothing more than a few traumatic things happened, and God was glorified.
Sure.
And so that's the root of that story. And that I have that I wrote an allegory right before that about being out in the world trying to talk to people about Jesus, and the trauma and destruction that you see at every turn when you get outside your country and culture, subculture of origin. A lot of time we all have trauma, but when you get out into the world, I think you see a broader swath of trauma, and that is very eye-opening and traumatic in itself to see and to think through God's sovereignty and his choices. So anyway, that's a long answer, but that's kind of where my stories come from. And then I wrestle through the very long and tedious and hard writing process.
Yeah, let's drill down on that. That, because there's a lot of leaders I know who are thinking about writing books. There's a lot of my podcast family who's like, I always think about being a writer. Are you the kind of person that's like, I got to do 1,000 words a day, or I got to do 5,000 in a week? Or are you going to storyboard the whole thing and then try to like map it out? And then here's another question that I had as I heard you talking was like, do you always have to go on adventures in order to write books?
No, but I'm currently, I'll talk about my current project.
Yes, please. That's
both
great.
of them. We adopted our daughter when we were in Turkey, and it ended up wonderfully. Obviously, we have our joy. It was
Sure.
a marvelous, never change anything about it. And also at the same time, it was incredibly traumatic, and we were trapped we were trapped by the government. And in the end, we had to have State Department intervention to get us out. So there were a lot of traumatic pain points throughout a really good outcome. And there are lingering traumatic pain points.
Of course.
So we've been home for 2 years, and the Lord told me at Bob Goff I needed to stop writing the fiction book I was writing, and I needed to write this story because I was complaining to him after our first night at Bob Goff. I was complaining to him about the grief that is wrapped around my writing right now. I'm having trouble writing with anything because I'm so grieved, and I want my joy back. And just in a long conversation with him, I understood this is how I get my joy back. This is how I have always processed grief, is to write through it. So I'm starting, and I have started, and I am writing. I'm trying an hour a day. We live in a multi-generational home, and there's a lot of input and a lot of joy and love and noise. So we're bringing up my parents' trailer to the side of the house for 3 months, and I am going to have time set aside early in the morning and a few occasional evenings and the occasional 24-hour nesting time. And I'm going to write for 3 months. That's going to be my free time activity because there's already plenty of normal work in life.
Sure.
And I have done it differently at different stages of life. The book that you're reading, I wrote predominantly from 8 to midnight in the first 6 months that I was married, because my husband would fall asleep and I would write forever. And I'm a terrible example. Everybody who writes an hour a day gets their books done quicker. I write quicker than, like, my first book at 25, I said, I am going to finish one of these books, because I had started several and just, dilly-dallied with every new idea. And it took me 5 years to finish. And so now, like, if I can finish a draft in 3 months, that'll be the quickest ever. And I'll be very excited.
Do you find yourself, when you're not working on a particular project, is journaling a part of your regular disciplines? I've gotten to know you a little bit. I know that you're drenched in your relationship with the Lord, and I always love that about leaders. What are some of your daily disciplines, and is writing included?
Usually it is. In this season, it has not been. Probably since my 6-year-old entered the picture. What I do regularly is I write poetry. I have about 2 years ago, I started a weekly discipline of writing a piece of poetry or a creative writing piece. And I put that out on a newsletter once a week, just to kind of, as a, lost the word, a discipline.
Yeah.
And I write, so it's generally poetry comes out of me in a burst of about 5 minutes, and then I spend about an hour finagling it later. But I write poetry I rewrite the Psalms, basically.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And sometimes I get images when I'm reading the Bible. I just really see a strong image, and so I'll write that image or that reflection. So I'd say 80% of it is poetry and 20% is sort of short fiction. I don't journal I have journaled at different times, but yeah, I don't really do that. I should.
Listen, I don't shit on anybody, because it goes in and out and flows, and I think that's a beautiful way. I think the Lord meets us in seasons, in different seasons, and so we just have to be present in the season we're in, and know that season may not last forever, but also, living on the edges of what feels comfortable is always good too. And when I picked up the book that you sent me, I always like to do kind of a glance at it. Like, I just love the feel of a good book. I'm sure you do too. You're in this world a lot more than I am. One of the reasons I have a podcast is to get free books. And I'm thankful for it. Praise the Lord. So I stole this from another podcaster. I love to read dedication pages. And the dedication page of this book said, for the kind man, and then in parentheses, of great patience, who won my heart. And so I'm curious about what it's like in your marriage for your family to be married and mothered by someone who has a non-traditional calling.
Challenging and exciting and joining in the non-traditional, I would say. My wonderful, kind husband, we met, my aunt introduced us when I was in California. They went to church together, and I was in California getting a visa to move to Spain. So I had my 10 years in corporate and like was bursting out of the cubicle. So my husband and I met, and he doggedly chased me down across the world for 3 years, and
Wow.
ending up with, he visited me in Spain, he visited me in Cyprus. He quit his job and moved to Cyprus for 6 months so we could date normally, even though I was in and out half the time traveling. He's so much the hero. I'm the villain of our story, but he was an elder in his church, and he had done some crazy things. He worked in the inner city for years. But at the time that we met, he was going to Bed Bath & Beyond with his 3 guy friends, like on Friday nights. So that's sort of our joke. When something's going incredibly ludicrously, abnormally stressful, I'll joke with him, you could still be going to Bed Bath & Beyond and, have married somebody and had 6 kids and still been an elder. And he continues to assure me he's happy that he's joined me on my crazy.
What are some of the disciplines that you guys partake in as a married couple to keep that, to keep the marriage alive, especially because the seasons that you guys have in have from an outsider's perspective, they feel so outside of the normal. So I'm hesitant to use the word extreme, but like just the travel and the adoption and all the different things. And obviously, when you're writing a book, it can feel a little bit like you're married to the book, and, it just gets crazy. What do you guys do to make sure that you don't get disconnected?
Well, I'll tell you, in Turkey, we were in Turkey 8 years, and we prayed together every day, consistently. And we worked together, and we obviously lived together. We were together all the time. And we were always on the same page. And I credit that completely to the Lord and to praying together every day, whatever the season was, whatever our schedule was, even when we were blind with exhaustion with our newborn, like we just moved the time. And that was it. I mean, that's my number one. And that what's interesting is we have struggled mightily after getting back to the States, and have not yet been able to do it consistently. And I don't think that's the only reason, but it's certainly one of the pillars of why we're still struggling. I think we just recently started working together again, which has helped a lot, but life here is different, and the pace is different, and running off to school and having 2 different jobs, and it's interesting. It's still a work in progress. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, and we've tried different things in these last 2 years. We're trying to have breakfast together once a week. We're trying to have a date night semi-consistently. So it's very different from our life in Turkey. And we got married. We lived in my RV that I had traveled the country in a previous life, and we lived in the RV for 6 months, and then we moved to Turkey. And we were in Turkey 8 years. So that was the majority experience of our marriage. And this is a new season and new challenges and new joys.
Where do you guys live at now?
We live in Boise, Idaho.
Boise, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked that because you've traveled so much of the world, and obviously Idaho is a luxurious spot where everybody wants to be.
Yeah, let's not talk about how great it is.
It's real funny because at that writer's retreat, I felt like half the group was from Idaho. I don't know how that happened, but it was just a thing.
Or moving there, or just having, or planning to move there.
Right. It was very bizarre.
Yeah.
Here's the question. What do you do with a heart that seems like it was born to wonder, like yours?
Well, I'll tell you something that I'm still working through. I did not realize. Have you heard the term third culture kid?
Yeah.
TCK? Okay. So I did not realize I was one.
You should probably explain it though for the podcast family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a kid who's raised outside of their passport country for a significant amount of time in their first 5 years. There are some real, just like anything else, it's just a category, but there are some, symptoms or conditions or whatever that go along with that, challenges
Sure.
and joys. So my daughter was born in Turkey and lived her first 3 years in Turkey and went to Turkish preschool, and it's a completely different culture. And we, because of the situation we were in, knew that we were moving probably forever. And so I was trying to help her reading a third culture kid book. And only in the reading of it did I go, oh, I have that. I was taken to Germany when I was 4 months old. My mom was in the military, and we were in Germany until I was almost 3. And then we moved home, never went back. But because of those formative experiences, I'm a third culture kid. One of those symptoms or challenges or whatever is you have one of the good things is you're home wherever you are, which is a very good, you make your home wherever you are. That's a good part. But one of the challenges is you feel the need to move your home every 3 years. You feel the need to make a great change that frequently. So we've been here 2 years. It's been great. And there's been a lot of transition and healing and, reverse culture shock and all of that. But I can feel myself. I can feel that need to change something bubbling up, which I just can't do in this season of life. And we're talking about mortgages and roots, and that starts to make me feel like I'm in quicksand, which is a really interesting, I don't know. It's very odd because we're here, we're home with our family and our friends, and we're living with my parents, and and my daughter, who's an only child, has family. It's beautiful. And here I am, starting to itch. Like, we got to go. We got to move somewhere, So I'm still working through that. I don't know how that's going to shake out, but there's a lot of things in life like that, right? That
Listen.
You get exactly what you asked for, and then you become discontent.
I come from a recovery background a little bit, and my counselor and I talk about that I need to have my designated drama, right? Like I need something in my life that feels dramatic because I have that deep inside of me, and if I don't designate it, it will designate me, right? And so basically, if I don't figure out a place to have a little bit of chaos and drama in my life on purpose, then in other places it will pop up on its own. And that's less ideal.
I love that. I have never heard of that. That's my takeaway. I'm going to think about that. I mean, I'm sorry that that's true, but you found a way to...
It's a gift, though. It's
great.
a gift.
It is,
It's a gift, right? So, like right now, I'm really thinking about saunas. I really want a sauna real bad. That's not really in the budget. That's not what my wife wants, but I'm like down, and smoking meat. Those are the two areas where I'm doing stuff that's just not stuff that I would normally do, but it's my designated drama in this season of my life.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I smoked brownies yesterday, which I'm not a baker. I don't do that normally. It didn't turn out well, but it was just what I need. Like I needed this little ooh, can I do this? Is this my, a place to put all that nervous kind of energy, because it was, we have a week off and my disciplines are all out of whack. And so the only thing I could think of is well, I should probably smoke some brownies then. Right. It's just, I promise you, I'm not even smoking weed and I'm making brownies. It's super funny.
I think my writing is like that. I would
It's
call it what am I passionate about right now?
yeah.
And it's a similar vein.
I love it. I love it. I think it's just the more you get aware of that, the better, the easier I think things get to navigate.
Mm.
I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about the place where you're working now, Blue Hat Publishing. Can you tell us about what Blue Hat Publishing is and the work that you do there?
Yeah. Well, about a year and a half ago, uh, a friend and I had a publishing company with another gal, and then these other two guys had a publishing company. And just through a divine encounter, really, we joined up. And so there were four of us for a year, and then one of our partners just retired. And basically, what we did was we created what we wish we had been able to have. We were all writers. I'm the one who has written the most, but they've all written and had difficulties with the process. It's a difficult process. Writing is very
Right.
solitary, as you know. And then there are so many different aspects to it. All of the in terms of what it takes to get a book out there, from the passion little seed in your heart that you can't say no to, because that's usually who finally ends up writing, is they're not able to like suppress the
Burden
passion trying
becomes
to
too
blow
heavy,
out.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so we and then traditional publishing is very interesting and very challenging right now. And I always tell people it's a great time to be a writer. There are so many opportunities. My first
Mm-hmm.
book came out 20 years ago, and it was a different landscape, completely different landscape. I mean, even 5 years ago was a different landscape.
Yeah.
So it's a great time. And there are so many people who seem to have this burden, this passionate seed that they want to tell their story. It's a great time to do it. Just don't do it alone. It's so hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. So Blue Hat, we formed out of our two companies, and we're a boutique independent publisher. And our specialty is we want to be friends and come alongside and partner and do everything that you don't want to do other than the writing, because we don't ghostwrite and we don't write for you. But we're going to give you every type of support that we can to help you get from the burning seed to a book in your hand. And the process looks different for everybody, and the timeline looks different for everybody. And we meet with every client and sort of figure out what they need, which parts of the process they need, and which they can do on their own. And then we work with them, and we're partners, and we become friends, and it's really, really fun. It's really satisfying the passion of my heart about storytelling, and it's an interesting era that we're in. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody wanting to tell, not everybody, but there's so many people who want to tell their story. And I think of the verse about they'll overcome by the blood of the lamb and the word of their testimony. And so many people are wanting to write the word of their testimony. This difficult set of circumstances, and God was good. And this is what I saw, and this is what he did. And that's what I'm writing. That's what I'm writing right now for my daughter, Joy. This is what I saw when you came, and this is what I lived, and this is what I saw God do. And it's encouraging to my heart, and it's encouraging to the rest of us who need encouragement. But it is hard. It's hard. It's always been hard, but it's hard right now. And I think it's one way of holding each other up as the body of Christ, is to continually tell the story, the testimony of how good God is.
Yeah.
I
love it.
I'm passionate about it.
That's good. I would be upset if you weren't. Let me ask you this. What are you learning about leaders as you listen to them share that burning seed when they come to you guys for that meeting? Because I would imagine one of the unique perspectives that you get is you sit down with people who are thought leaders, or who have a story, or who are thinking generational instead of just generating. It's something I talk about a lot, is that we have to do generational ministry, not just generating ministry. And like this idea about what are you seeing in the greater body of Christ as you talk to these people who are trying to get their stories out?
I think it might be a factor of the people who have time and have, I think writing the kind of books that the authors that come to us, the kind of books that they're writing are sort of mid to later life
Yeah.
Seasons. And like I just turned 50 this year, and it's the same thing. This is what I have seen. This is what I have learned. I would like to pass it on. It's kind of a legacy thing for a lot of our authors. And they're, they need varying degrees of help with writing and with editing for sure. But they're trying to synthesize the stories of a lifetime and pick the stories that help, in the telling of the pillars that they want to tell. And that's a little bit different for everybody, but the leadership books that we have done really fall in that category. They're trying to speak back to the generations to follow.
Yeah, that's good.
And a lot of writing and storytelling is picking what to include and picking what to discard. And so, some of the authors that we're working with, we cut a third of the book once they give it to us, but that's part of the refining and editing process. But yeah, they're trying to do that. They're trying to help the next generation maybe have a leg up with the things they've learned.
That's so good and so important. It's such important work. So I actually have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I know that the podcast family is going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things Jodi? How can they make sure that they sign up to get a pre-release of your next book whenever that comes out? When is this book coming out, the one that you're working on now?
Well, my goal is to have the rough draft by the end of March. So we'll see. Well,
so when does then it publish, do you think?
Probably the end of the year. That's another beautiful thing about independent publishing is you can speed your timeline a lot.
So you have to come back on when it comes out. Deal?
I would love to.
Okay, good. All right, so I got distracted. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, jodicowles.com, COWLES, or Jodi Cowles is on Instagram, which I'm very terrible at. And my monthly newsletter that comes out about 3 times a year. All of that is available. I am the worst hypocrite because we tell all our authors, the best way to grow your audience and to make an impact is a monthly newsletter. And then I'm pretty terrible at it. But I have high hopes of getting 1% better.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So.
Okay, last question. I love to ask people. It's an advice question. I want to invite you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life that you're in. So I want to take you back to the day before your very first trip overseas as an adult. So maybe that was Spain. Is that right?
Well, I taught English in Korea after college and then came home
so maybe
for 10
it was
years.
Korea then. So if you could sit down knee to knee with that younger version of yourself, hold her hand and look her in the eye and give her one piece of advice about the journey she's about to go on, what would you tell her?
If she would actually listen and like I could really speak to her heart, I would tell her that it's going to be okay. I think that's the main story that I have tried to learn at different seasons, but it would have helped me. It's going to be okay. I learned through trauma that God is good.
Yeah.
And I learned through grief that that He is going to get us through, and that there's always another side to the whatever, the grief or the trauma or the stress. And I think I would have been calmer. And I would have loved to have been calmer.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
That's so good. Jodi, thank you so much for your generosity of time today. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for just be willing to hop on here and chat with me about all the things that God has done in your life. And I just really look forward to staying connected as this next book comes out.
It was a real pleasure. I love talking about what God has done.
Amen.